If you've run a few tasks by now, you might have noticed something. Every time you start a new one, Cowork starts completely fresh. It doesn't remember what it did yesterday, what preferences you set, or what feedback you gave. That's different from chat, where memory carries across conversations automatically. The way you get persistence in Cowork is through projects. You already know projects from the chat course. They're dedicated workspaces with their own instructions and knowledge. Cowork projects work the same way conceptually. The main difference is this. A Cowork project lives as a real folder on your computer. The instructions, the memory, the files it produces all sits on your disk, and you can see and edit any of it. To create one, you can click on Projects in the sidebar, then on New Project. You've got three ways to start. You can start from scratch if it's a new piece of work. You can import an existing chat project, which brings your files and instructions across, though it's a one-way copy, so changes won't sync back. Or you can point Cowork at a folder you already work from, and that folder becomes the project. I'll start a new one from scratch and give it a name, and leave the default location. Now let's look at what a project actually looks like. The main view should feel familiar if you've used projects in Claude Chat. It's the same basic setup with a few things that work differently in Cowork. In Recents, each task shows the files it's touched. They're attached to the task card, so you can click into any of them and open the file directly. There's also an Outputs view, which shows the recent files this project has produced. Useful for when you're looking for a deliverable, but you can't remember which task made it. On the right, you'll see three panels. Instructions, where you set the rules and context for this project. Scheduled tasks, for any recurring work you've set up, which we'll get into later. And context, which shows the folders that Cowork can reach and the memory it's built up from previous tasks. Now let's send a task. The main area here is the chat view, which reads a lot like a regular conversation. You can see Cowork thinking, working, and asking you questions as it goes. On the right, you'll see three panels specific to this task. Progress, which shows what's been done so far and what's still running. Working folders, which shows only the folders that this particular task has actually touched. And finally, we have context, which is similar to what we saw in the main page for projects, but scoped down to just what this specific task actually used. So if you ever wonder whether a memory actually got applied, this is where you can check. Now we'll get back into the main project view and dig into instructions. Just like in Claude Chat, you can write instructions that get read at the start of every task. In Cowork, there are two levels. You can write instructions for the whole project, which apply to every task across all your folders, and you can write instructions for the individual folders, which only kick in when Cowork is working in that specific folder. This way, you can keep general instructions at the project level, and you can have more specific ones when they're needed. Some things that tend to be useful could be who's involved, like names and roles and how to reach them. So you can say, send this to Rachel, and it actually means something. Where things live. For example, you could say, contracts are in the contracts folder. Old reports are in the archive. Output preferences, for example, drafts in Word, finals as PDFs, and save to the deliverables subfolder. And rules and conventions, like metric units throughout. Cite the source for every number. These instructions don't need to be polished, and a few lines can be enough. And it'll make the difference between talking to what feels like an experienced colleague who's across the whole project and talking to a very smart intern who knows nothing about it. So for this project, I'll add a few instructions. I'll say use British spelling, avoid em dashes, and write for the ear, since these are spoken scripts. This is simple stuff, but it means every task in this project follows the same conventions without me having to repeat them. And just like in chat, these instructions can get better over time as you work. So you can run a task, notice something you'd want done differently next time, and tell Claude what it would add to the instructions based on what you just learned together. It'll suggest something, and then you can go back in and add it yourself. That back and forth of doing the work, refining, and updating the instructions is the same loop you already know from the chat course. Now let's talk about memory. Memory is what Cowork picks up about this project and the work in it over time. Preferences, people, corrections, or one-off facts. It stores all of this inside the project. And when a task comes along where one of those details matters, Cowork can automatically pull the relevant memory into its context. If you've used memory in Claude Chat, it's a similar idea, but the difference here is that memory is isolated to the project. Memory builds up in two ways. Passively, as Cowork notices things worth remembering, or explicitly when you tell it to. These could be simple things like, remember that reports should always use metric units, or remember that Sarah handles client approvals. Or they could be much richer, something like the entire background of a particular project, or everything about a particular client. Either way, Claude writes it to a file, and it will hold it for future tasks. And all of this memory lives as real files on your computer. You can open any of them, see what Cowork's written, change the wording, or delete ones that don't apply anymore. Let me show you what this actually looks like. I've been working in this project for quite a while, so there's quite a lot of memory already built up. Over in the context panel, you'll see a memory.md file. That's essentially the index of memories with a one-line summary of each memory in the project. The full memories live as separate files. They might include when Cowork picked it up, why it matters, and how to apply it. I can click into any of them and read it and tell Cowork to adjust or remove it. The more you use a project and build up its memory, the sharper it gets. So anytime you catch yourself re-explaining the same thing, you can just tell Cowork to remember it. And now it's your turn. If you've got an ongoing piece of work with files already in your computer, create a project and just point to that folder. If you don't, just start a fresh project around something you're interested in. Write a few lines of instructions to give Cowork some context, then run a few tasks inside of it. Give it feedback, tell it to remember things that matter, and build the project up a little. As with everything in this course, the way you get good at this is to reach for projects whenever you can. The more you use a project, the less you'll have to explain for each new task, until it genuinely feels like handing work to someone who's really across it.